purification process significantly cheaper. Now, I'll just close by saying that if you can make fuels that mimic the fuels we get from petroleum, there's no reason we can't make all of the other chemicals that we make from petroleum and do so in an environmentally friendly way. Things like the carpet on the floor, the finish on the wood, the paint on the walls, the tiles on the ceiling. All of those things come in part or in whole from petroleum, and this is a way for our advanced biofuels companies to make a profit while they're getting the costs down for these advanced fuels. And anywhere from 15 to 20% of every barrel of oil goes to make all of the chemicals that we use on a day-to-day basis. And it's pretty extensive, the products that come from petroleum. So just in closing, we've made significant headway in the science to transform cellulosic biomass into fuels and chemicals. There's still a lot of work to be done, but this year was an important year for cellulosic fuels because several commercial plants opened up around the world. These are plants that are based on technologies that are at least 15 years old. With the developments that we've been making at places like the Joint Bioenergy Institute and the Energy Biosciences Institute, both of which are in Berkeley, we think in the future have cellulosic fuels out there fueling our vehicles. And just to tell you where we've come in terms of cost, when we started JBay, we started out with costs of fuel that are around $300,000 a gallon. And that's because we used some really risky technologies. We really wanted to go out there and try to have game-changing technologies. With the technologies that we've currently developed, we've cut the cost to about under $40 a gallon if fully implemented.
No, that's a logarithmic.
That's right. It's a logarithmic scale
1, 10,
there.
100, not 1, 2, 3. So
that's right. That's right. It's a logarithmic scale, and the lowest cost we think we can get to is under $4 a gallon if you don't do anything with the lignin. If you sell the lignin for a product, we could maybe even get it under $3 a gallon, which is substantial. We're a long ways to go, but we're making headway. We are not just a research institute that puts out papers. We license our technologies. Roughly half of the things that we disclose, we patent, and more than half of those get licensed out. And by the way, this is above some of the leading research institutes in the world, even above the UC system, Caltech, Columbia, et cetera, in terms of the licensing per $100 million of research funding. And these are all the companies that we work with to try to get our technologies out to the world and to people. So in conclusion, we've developed renewable carbon neutral fuels from biomass. It's a complex technical process, but we've made significant headway. Research is still needed to lower the cost of producing advanced transportation fuels. And this model that we've created in the Joint Bioenergy Institute of bringing together researchers from California national laboratories and universities together to work on this problem as a team really accelerates the process of discovery and gets it out to companies that can put it to use. Thank you.
Well, just to start, and I don't think this is the right place to discuss it, but let me just put it out there that a quarter, it's only a quarter, or it sure as hell is a lot of land, even if it's only a quarter. And we have people today who are very worried about feeding the world, particularly as people become richer in the developing world. They want more meat. That means several times as much grain as if they're eating the grain directly. So I do think this is an issue. I think it's particularly an issue in South America, whereas if we really do go after a lot of sugar cane, you're going to displace food crops. The people are going to start taking down the Amazon, as I mentioned initially. This is something I'm extremely concerned about. Do you want to address that? Or?
Yeah, I'm happy to address that. So I, too, am concerned about that. I would not like to see food traded for fuel. So a couple of things. One is that since the last century, the amount of farmed ground in the U.S. has decreased substantially. And that is because farmers have become more efficient and because they're abandoning the lands that are not as productive. The crops that we're looking at are crops that would be grown on those lands that have been abandoned and on land that would not be as productive for food. So what it means is that in places like California, where we grow a lot of food, we probably wouldn't have as much in terms of dedicated energy crops. But there is a lot of residue. And in the past, crops like rice, they burn, and still in parts of the world, they burn the rice straw off the fields. That rice straw could be gathered and turned into fuel. So, in fact, one might be able to have food and fuel, and just by planting on some of these lands that aren't as productive for food, we can have both.
Well, but the land that gets fallow has its own uses with more native crop, with more native plants, wildlife, etc. When you go to a monoculture of a crop, you don't have those same benefits.
It's definitely true that some of those have been recovered and made wild again, and so there's natural habitat there. Because of the processes that we're using, we don't necessarily have to have monocultures in the field. And if you use things like grasses, like switchgrass, they have substantial benefits in terms of carbon neutrality because you don't have to till the soil every year to replant. They're perennials rather than annuals, so you can harvest them. Many of these crops send the nutrients back into the soil as they die down in the fall. So you don't need as much fertilizer. So essentially much of what you're recovering off the field is carbon. And there was a study done at the University of Nebraska several years ago that showed that farming switchgrass can even be, and turning it into fuel and burning that fuel in a car can even become carbon negative because the microbes get established in the soil. They fix a lot of carbon out of the atmosphere. So you even have this possibility of becoming carbon negative by producing these things.
Wow. So the next question, though, is you've got some great ideas. What's it going to take and how long to get these out, and are there things we ought to be doing here in California?
Right. So I mentioned that this has been a good year for cellulosic biofuels because there have been factories that have come on, full-scale factories that have come online producing cellulosic fuels, but they're using older technology. And so I think with time we'll see that they'll start to use newer and newer technologies. There's still a lot of research to be done, and so continued support for research. I would say steady policy is extremely important because these factories to make biofuels, these biorefineries, are expensive to build. And they need to know that there'll be a reason to purchase that fuel that's made in these refineries, and so that will allow these companies to go to the bank and get loans. So steady policies. Obviously, a carbon tax would be a great thing, so that
That's
we
not
can
happening.
level the playing field.
Sorry.
But California's leading the way, and I think it needs to continue to lead the way.
Yeah. The carbon tax. I just don't see a pathway to that. And
Frankly,
even
I
if
don't
we
either.
did, though, the prices you'd have to charge, I think, to make a difference are just extremely high. But Dr. Kiesling, you do make a good case. Assemblymember Bloom, our director on, our expert on cap and trade funds and such.
I hesitate to be identified as an expert in the company of the folks who've been speaking to us today. And it's good to see you again, Dr. Kiesling. Thank you for your slide deck, except for the last one, because you actually have words on that one. I was following you up until that slide. But in one of the slides towards the end, you had that great list of probably 100 products or so that are petroleum-based that could benefit from this technology. And I know you have a dream of creating something you call the biofoundry. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah. The technology that we've created that allows us to engineer plants to produce more sugar and to engineer microbes to produce these fuels can be used to do many other things. And when I was introduced, the introduction mentioned artemisinin. So artemisinin is an anti-malarial drug. We took the genes out of a plant and put them into a microbe yeast and got it to spit out this artemisinin. It turns out that this artemisinin is a hydrocarbon, and so by just making a few changes in the genetics of that microbe, we're able to produce biofuels and fuels that have similar look and feel properties to things like diesel. If you can do that, then you can produce many other products. But we need to do so quickly. And one of the challenges in using biology to produce these products rather than chemistry and petroleum is that it's expensive to do the research and it takes a long time. And so many companies can't afford to do that. One of the things that we're doing is democratizing the engineering of biology through a foundry, just like we have foundries for developing silicon chips so they can go into our cell phones and our computers, and those prices for those very complicated devices have come down substantially. We want to do the same thing for biology to make it easy to engineer so that it won't cost a company $1 billion to engineer a microbe, scale it up to produce a product from sugar, that they can do it in with much less cost. And so we have many more products out there derived from biology.
Thank you.
Very good. Well, it's been fascinating. We do need more input. You say keep the policy constant. We do need more input as to what that policy should be to encourage the industry. So as you have ideas, and I know we've got a great Department of Economics across the road at UC Berkeley, we'd be glad to hear them. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so we now have Mr. Eric White, who is the chief of the Mobile Sources Control Division at the California Air Resources Board. He oversees a staff of 160 in the development and implementation of key California light-duty and heavy-duty emissions reduction programs for both new and in-use conventional vehicles. He's responsible for working closely with other government agencies and stakeholders on the coordinated development, implementation, and deployment of new and emerging near-zero and zero-emission advanced vehicle technologies, which include overseeing $450 million of annual state funding in support of these efforts. So Mr. White has received his Bachelor of Science degree in Aerospace Engineering from UCLA and has been with the Air Resources Board since 1993. And we also have someone else who should probably introduce himself.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Quirk, members of the committee. I'm Floyd Vergara. I'm Chief of the Industrial Strategies Division at the Air Resources Board also. I'm a colleague of Mr. White. I'm here to cover any detailed questions you may have on the fuel side of things.
So if you could give your 10-minute talk in 20 minutes, that would be great.
That sounds very good. And thank you both, Mr. Chair, and Assembly Member Bloom for sticking around to hear about the work that the Air Resources Board is doing. It takes two of us to describe all of the things that we have going on at the ARB. Related to meeting Governor Brown's goal to reduce petroleum usage in the transportation sector by up to 50% by 2030. And what I really hope by listening to the testimony today, help connect how the technologies that have been discussed earlier fit within the policy frameworks that ARB is implementing as we move forward towards our climate and petroleum reduction goals. I'm going to begin today by reviewing the 5 climate change strategy pillars outlined by the governor during his inaugural address earlier this year. Next, I'll bring you up to date on how we're doing with regard to meeting our first greenhouse gas target established under AB 32 for reducing GHG emissions to 1990 levels by 2020. The remainder of today's testimony will then focus on some of the key technologies and strategies for heavy-duty vehicles, fuels, energy, and system efficiencies that we think will be critical to meet our 2030 petroleum reduction and greenhouse gas goals. We will be engaging a full public process via an update to the scoping plan to identify specific policy and potential technology pathways for meeting these 2030 targets. But we must recognize that meeting our climate and petroleum reduction goals is just one part of the puzzle. Over half of the state's population continues to live in areas that do not meet federal health-based air quality standards, and the air quality challenges we face are significant. So as we evaluate what must be done to meet our air quality and climate stabilization goals, we must recognize that the strategies we implement and the technologies we deploy will need to achieve both. It is these common strategies that I'll focus on today. After describing some of these key technologies for vehicles and fuels, I'll turn to describing the important role that incentives play in meeting our climate and air quality goals and highlight some of our initial strategic investments. Reducing petroleum usage in the transportation sector is one of 5 pillars the governor identified in his January 2015 inaugural address to combat climate change. The other 4 pillars include increasing from 1/3 to 50% our electricity derived from renewable sources by 2030, doubling the efficiency savings achieved at existing buildings by 2030 and making heating fuels cleaner, reducing the release of methane, black carbon, and other short-lived climate pollutants, and managing farm, rangelands, forests, and wetlands so they can store carbon. These 5 climate change pillars support and are critical to achieving the midterm and long-term greenhouse gas reduction targets established by governor's executive orders. Before talking about 2030, let's look at our progress towards meeting the 2020 goals laid out in AB 32. This slide illustrates the trajectory of California's greenhouse gas emissions since the turn of the century, since 2000. And where we anticipate greenhouse gas emissions would be in 2020 with and without AB 32 strategies. As you can see, thanks to California's coordinated vehicle, fuels, and land use policies, greenhouse gas emissions continue to decline, and we're well on our way to meeting our AB 32 2020 goal. Key strategies that have helped drive these reductions include the Low Carbon Fuel Standard, California's Cap and Trade Program, heavy-duty vehicle greenhouse gas emission standards, and zero-emission truck and bus incentive programs. Furthermore, these programs will continue to provide ongoing emission reductions well beyond 2020. However, the path to 2030 will be more challenging. So while the 2030 greenhouse gas and petroleum reduction goals are ambitious, our current climate change program provides a foundation on which we can build, and we firmly believe current and future action will put us on a path to achieve this target. As we map out a path to 2030, the foundational work to get us there is already underway. ARB has initiated a number of planning efforts that have different but complementary objectives, all with an eye to 2030. These include an update to the state implementation plan to demonstrate attainment with federal ambient air quality standards, a sustainable freight strategy to develop a more modern, efficient, and sustainable freight system, and AB 32 climate change scoping plan updates, and short-lived climate pollutant strategy documents to meet California's climate objectives. These planning efforts provide us an opportunity for comprehensive planning, prioritizing those strategies that enable us to meet multiple air quality and climate challenges. Accordingly, we expect each of these plans will include significant increases in vehicle and transportation system efficiencies and significant deployment of zero-emission technologies. These plans not only lay a clear path forward, but highlight the collaboration and coordination with our local, state, and federal partners and solidify the role of California on the international stage as a leader in climate and petroleum policy. Let's take a closer look at some of the key heavy-duty vehicle technologies we're pursuing. First, we're partnering with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to develop robust national Phase 2 vehicle efficiency and greenhouse gas standards for heavy-duty engines and vehicles. These standards will accelerate development and deployment of advanced drivetrains, hybridization, advanced aerodynamic trailers, and other fuel-efficient technologies, all while saving fleets money through reduced fuel consumption. We anticipate these more stringent Phase 2 standards, when combined with already adopted Phase 1 standards, will cut fuel consumption and greenhouse gas emissions from big rig trucks by at least 40% compared to 2010 levels. We expect these proposed national standards will be released for public comment very shortly. We're also partnering on research and development of heavy-duty engines that emit substantially less smog-forming emissions than even the cleanest truck and bus engines on the market today. These cleaner heavy-duty engines, when coupled with low-carbon, sustainable fuel, can provide significant near-term emission and greenhouse gas benefits. While more efficient vehicles and cleaner combustion will be critical to meet air quality and climate targets in the 2030 timeframe, significant deployment of zero-emission technologies will be needed to meet our longer-term 2050 targets. ARB is pursuing comprehensive strategies to both deploy and, as we're already seeing, the beginning of the needed transition to zero-emission truck and bus technologies today. While this transition is underway, it will not be easy. Given the diversity in heavy-duty vehicle duty cycles, it will be critical to match each technology's capability with the vehicle's operational needs. Battery electric and fuel cell vehicle technology show significant promise for extensive deployment in urban and short-haul applications with opportunities for centralized charging or fueling. For vehicles in heavier weight classifications with moderate range, strategies such as plug-in hybrid technologies or trucks using catenary electric infrastructure along key transportation corridors can be effective.
What does catenary mean?
Catenary are, think of the transit buses that operate in San Francisco. They're the wires over top of the roadway that the bus would connect to. Yes.
Thank you.
For long-range trucks and buses where electrification is not yet practical, cleaner combustion engines using renewable fuels and hydrogen fuel cell technology are being incentivized already. Hundreds of battery electric urban delivery trucks are now operating in California with the help of incentive funding provided by ARB, the California Energy Commission, and many other state agencies. We are now seeing growing numbers of battery electric and fuel cell buses as well, which are in the early commercialization phase, being deployed by many transit agencies. As you heard earlier, AC Transit in the East Bay and Sunline Transit in Palm Desert are already operating 16 fuel cell buses in daily revenue service, while Long Beach Transit just purchased 10 new battery electric buses, and Foothill Transit in Southern California operates 15 fast-charging battery electric buses. Despite this initial progress, near-term challenges must still be overcome in terms of cost, vehicle range, payload, and the ability of fueling and charging infrastructure. To see the full benefits from implementation of these strategies, we'll need to ensure continued comprehensive interagency planning for fuels, energy, and fueling infrastructure, coupled with strong incentive support from the state. In looking at fuels, this slide focuses on the shift in fuels generating credits via the low-carbon fuel standard comparing 2011 to 2014. As you can see, the carbon intensity of ethanol has continued to decline, demonstrating that the low-carbon fuel standard incentivized significant innovation, even for established biofuels like ethanol. The contribution from non-ethanol fuels such as biodiesel, renewable diesel, and renewable natural gas also continues to expand. We've also seen a small but increasing contribution from electricity and hydrogen. We expect low-carbon fuel standard credits from these fuels to continue to increase as electric and fuel cell vehicles come into the market in greater numbers, generating greater market demand for these fuels. I would also like to highlight the major contribution of renewable diesel at 21% of the credits in 2014. These charts demonstrate the ability of the low-carbon fuel standard to pull low-carbon fuels to California. Together with biodiesel, renewable biomass-based diesel now represents a substantial portion of the California diesel pool. Transportation fuels are also covered by California's cap-and-trade program, and together with the low-carbon fuel standard, these programs provide strong market incentives for fuel suppliers to develop cleaner fuels for sale in the state.
Just a second. Could you explain which colors are which here? It's not all of us have perfect color resolution.
Difficult to read. I'm going to ask my colleague, Mr. Vergara, to walk us through this graph.
Okay, good.
Sure. We'll start with the biggest slice on the left. It's about 3/4 of the pie, and that's representing the starch ethanol. So basically, this is the corn ethanol, your first generation biofuels. Back in 2011, when the low carbon fuel standard kicked in, corn ethanol was the predominant source of credits for that program. As you can see here, last year in 2014, its role in providing credits for the LCFS program has diminished to about half, whereas the non-ethanol alternative fuels have all taken up increasing roles in generating credits. The purple slice in both pies that Eric mentioned is the renewable diesel. It went from 1% in 2011 to 21% in 2014, which is a substantial jump. And I apologize for the colors. I also had difficulty reading them. The red slice, it looked red on my phone. The somewhat brownish slice there, it starts off at 5% in 2011 to 0 in 2014, represents sugarcane ethanol. We expect that will be larger than it was in 2014 in future years. The reason it went down last year was due to a variety of reasons, most of them domestic reasons in Brazil, where most of that sugarcane ethanol comes from. The electricity, as you could see on 2011, represented 1%. It's kind of a gold slice. It went up to 3% in 2014, so a nice jump there. Biodiesel was the light blue slice, went from 6% to 18%. And then renewable diesel we've already covered. And then the last two slices are other shades of green. The dark green represented conventional fossil natural gas, went from 13% of the credits in 2011 to about 5%. And that was because it was being displaced by a large increase in renewable natural gas. So this is the biogas that was mentioned earlier, derived from decomposition of organic waste. So it went from 1% to 4%, a quadrupling of that volume. Do you have any other questions on that?
That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Thank you, Floyd. As we think about electricity and energy, the Renewable Portfolio Standard is also helping further reduce the carbon footprint of the electricity powering zero-emission vehicles on the road today. We have an opportunity in the coming decades to look at zero-emission vehicles and an increasingly renewable grid as a system. Vehicle grid integration and power-to-gas technologies can create a synergistic relationship between renewable electricity on the grid, electricity demand management, and zero-emission technologies in the heavy-duty sector. Zero-emission vehicles can and will play an important role in helping to integrate renewable power and balance the grid through managed charging of electric vehicles or producing hydrogen from grid electricity. Vehicle-to-grid technology can also help manage peak load demand, with zero-emission vehicles potentially performing a load management function. The two biggest challenges in transitioning to low-carbon fuels and zero-emission technologies are time and cost. 15 years is not a long time in the heavy-duty world, especially considering the relatively long life of today's trucks and buses. That's why incentives will play a critical role in ensuring this technology transformation occurs smoothly to 2030 and beyond. ARB's Air Quality Improvement Program and most recently, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund are enabling us to make the critical early investments that we need. These programs propose funding plan for the upcoming fiscal year, which will be considered by the Air Resources Board just next week, proposes $167 million for key technology advancing programs contingent upon appropriation by the legislature. These include demonstration and pilot programs for zero-emission transit buses, drayage trucks, and freight equipment. These targeted investments enable fleets to evaluate promising pre-commercial zero-emission technologies, encourage fleet purchase of technologies once they hit the market, and provide for fueling or charging infrastructure. They will enable early adopter fleets to integrate and deploy technology into their operations, reduce technology costs, and provide a foundation for potential zero-emission vehicle requirements more broadly in the heavy-duty sector. We are coordinating these efforts with those occurring at the California Energy Commission, the California State Transportation Agency, and others to ensure the state's investments are complementary. As an example, the California Energy Commission and other agency programs provide incentives for charging infrastructure, low-carbon and renewable fuels, workforce training, and other complementary technologies. Taken together, the state's portfolio of investments are helping ensure that the vehicles and infrastructures of tomorrow are being put on the road today, and that they are providing benefits to all Californians, including those residing in disadvantaged communities. We anticipate this strategy of enabling technology development, demonstration, and deployment will repeat itself as zero-emission technology matures and migrates to even more challenging sectors, including construction, agriculture, and port equipment. While fuel and vehicle improvements will provide significant benefits and progress towards our 2030 goals, we must go beyond just cleaner vehicles, equipment, and fuels to meet our air quality and climate objectives. We're working with our sister agencies to evaluate opportunities for additional freight transformation and implementing logistics and information technology changes for greater operational and system-wide efficiencies. Approached this way, the state can move more goods with less petroleum and less pollution, with significant operational savings for California businesses. What are the next steps for meeting our petroleum reduction goals for 2030? First, the administration will be hosting a series of public symposia this summer regarding the 5 pillars of addressing climate change. This will include a symposium on July 8th in Sacramento to discuss the state's commitment to reduce petroleum use in the transportation sector and provide an open dialogue and public process to elicit new ideas. Potential topics for discussion could include specific regulatory measures, research and demonstration programs, new incentive programs, and legislative strategies. Over the coming months, comments received from this symposium will form and inform the climate change scoping plan update and other strategic planning documents being developed. The scoping plan update will address not only how we expect to achieve our 50% petroleum goal, but how all the other pillars that have been identified by the governor will be met. We anticipate kicking off development of our climate change scoping plan update with workshops in the next several months and a briefing plan for our board in late 2016. While we believe achieving our goals will be challenging, we firmly believe they are achievable. As California has done so successfully in the past, we must define strategies that unleash private sector investment and innovation. We must strengthen our partnerships with other state, federal, and local agencies, as well as our international partners. And more than ever, we must look at our environment, transportation system, energy, and economy sectors as part of an integrated whole, whose success depends on our collaboration and coordination. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may